Where is God when your weakness feels like the only real thing in your life? I want to start with something personal. There was a season in my life when I stopped praying, not because I lost my faith, but because I ran out of words, and the silence that followed did not feel peaceful. It felt like proof that something was broken inside me. What I could not see then was this: the moment my strength ran out was not the moment God walked away. It was the moment He finally had room to move. This is not a message about trying harder or believing bigger. I know you are already tired of hearing that. This is about something I had to discover the hard way in a parking lot one afternoon, sitting in my car, unable to move, feeling empty in a way I could not even explain. No crisis, no dramatic story, just gone from the inside. Sitting there, I had one thought: if this is who I really am beneath everything, maybe God made a mistake choosing me for anything. I did not know then that what cracks open is exactly what can be filled. I went back to Scripture after that season, not looking for inspiration, but looking for evidence. And what I found changed how I see weakness entirely. I want to show you 6 things God is doing in your life right now that your weakness is making almost impossible to see. Your weakness is not your identity. It is your current address. Here is the first thing I had to unlearn. When you live inside weakness long enough, you stop describing it and start becoming it. You no longer say, "I am going through a hard season." You say, "I am someone who cannot hold it together." You stop seeing yourself as called, capable, purposed. You start introducing yourself to your own reflection as tired, stuck, and not enough. That shift is subtle, and it is one of the most dangerous things weakness does to a person. There is a moment in Genesis 32 that I kept coming back to. Jacob wrestled with God through the entire night, and when morning came, he walked away limping, a permanent mark on his body from the encounter. Most people read that limp as damage. I used to read it that way too. But that limp was not evidence of his failure. It was evidence that he had been in the presence of God and survived it. The wound and the blessing did not come from 2 separate events. They came on the same night. Here is what weakness does not want you to know. It disguises itself as permanence. It whispers, "This is not something you are going through. This is who you are now." And that whisper is the lie buried underneath all the exhaustion. I want to share one distinction that changed things for me. "I feel weak" is not the same sentence as "I am weak." One is describing where you are. The other is claiming who you are. One is an address, the other is an identity. And you are not your address. God's presence does not require your performance. Let me ask you something honestly. When was the last time you approached God without first trying to clean yourself up a little, without rehearsing what you were going to say, or waiting until you were in a better place emotionally, or feeling like you needed to show up with something worth offering? We do this without realizing it. We are wired to believe that access requires readiness. You do not invite guests over when the house is a mess. You do not walk into an interview unprepared. So, somewhere along the way, we applied that same logic to God. He receives us better when we have it together, that our weakness is an inconvenience to His presence. Then I read 1 Kings 19 with fresh eyes. Elijah had just done something extraordinary. He had called fire down from heaven in front of an entire nation. A miracle so undeniable it should have carried him for years. And then days later, he was sitting alone under a tree in the wilderness, asking God to let him die. "It is enough," he said. "Take my life." This is not a man who had drifted from God. This is a man who had just served God at the highest level of his calling, and he collapsed anyway. What I needed to see was what God did next. He did not send a correction. He did not send a lesson or a rebuke or a reminder of what Elijah should have been feeling. He sent an angel with bread and water twice. And the only words spoken were these: "Get up and eat, because the journey ahead is too much for you." God looked at the most broken version of Elijah and said, "I see how far you have come. Now let me take care of you." That is not the response of a God who requires performance. That is the response of a father who was already there before Elijah found the words to call out. He was already in the room before you got yourself together. He still is. What looks like God going quiet is often God going deep. Can I tell you what I think is actually the hardest part of a weak season? It is not the exhaustion. It is not even the pain. It is the silence that moves in alongside it. You pray, and nothing comes back. You wait, and nothing shifts. And after enough days of that, you stop wondering if God is distant. You start wondering if He was ever really there at all. That silence is where most people lose the most ground. I want to take you to a part of Joseph's story that we tend to rush past. We know the beginning, the coat, the brothers, the pit. We know the ending, the palace, the power, the reunion. But between those 2 points, there is something the text does quietly. There is no record of God speaking to Joseph during those years in slavery and prison. No vision in the night, no angel showing up in the cell, no burning bush moment. Just years of silence inside a story that made no sense. And then Genesis 50 arrives. Joseph is standing in front of the brothers who destroyed his life, and he says, "What you intended for harm, God intended for good." He did not say God was absent in the silence. He said God was working in it. The silence was not withdrawal. It was authorship. God was writing something during those years that was too layered, too precise, too interconnected to explain while it was still being written. Here is what I have come to understand. Silence from God is not the same as distance from God. Sometimes the quieter He gets, the deeper the work. So when you cannot hear Him right now, shift the question. Stop asking, "Why has He gone quiet?" Start asking, "What is He writing in this chapter that I cannot read yet?" Because some of what He is building in you right now only makes sense from the other side. Your weakness is exposing what you were trusting instead of Him. This one is uncomfortable, but I think it might be the most important thing in this entire video. Nobody discovers how much they were leaning on their own strength until that strength is no longer available. While your competence is working, you call it faith. While your plans are holding, you call it trust. While your relationships are stable, and your health is steady, and your reputation is intact, you call it God. And then one of those things breaks, and suddenly the faith you thought you had feels much thinner than you believed it was. I lived this. I genuinely thought I was a person who trusted God. And then a season arrived where my usual ways of managing life stopped working. My strategies, my ability to think my way through problems, my track record of figuring things out, all of it went quiet at the same time, and I discovered something I did not want to see. I had not been trusting God. I had been trusting God plus my own ability to control outcomes. It looked like faith from the outside. But the moment the second half of that equation was removed, I had nothing to stand on. Paul understood this from the other side. He had a weakness he begged God to remove. 3 separate times he brought the same request, and 3 times God said no. What God said instead reorganized everything Paul thought he knew. My grace is enough for you. My power reaches its full expression precisely in your weakness. 2 Corinthians 12:9. Paul was not given the relief he asked for. He was given something that outlasted relief. He was given a revelation. So here is the question I want you to sit with honestly. Before this season of weakness arrived, what were you actually standing on? Not what you would have said in a church setting. What were you actually leaning on day to day? Because the weakness may not be what God is doing to you. It may be what He is doing for you, clearing away everything temporary so you can finally find out what holds. God is not building your strength right now. He is building your roots. We have a very specific picture in our minds of what growth is supposed to look like. More clarity than yesterday, more confidence than last month. Visible movement, measurable progress, something you can point to and say, "See, things are getting better." And when a season produces none of that, we conclude nothing is happening. But some of the most significant growth in a person's life happens in a direction nobody can see, including the person it is happening to. I think about trees in drought conditions. When water becomes scarce, a tree does not wither immediately. It sends its roots deeper, further down than they have ever gone, looking for what is underneath rather than what is on the surface. And from the outside, the tree looks the same. Maybe even looks like it is struggling. But underground, something is being established that will hold it through conditions that would topple a shallower root system entirely. Isaiah 40 says those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. That word, renew in the original language, carries the idea of exchange, not recovery. You are not getting back what you had before. You are receiving something sourced from a completely different place. That distinction matters more than it sounds. Recovery restores what was already there. It brings you back to your previous level. But what God does in a genuine season of waiting is not restoration. It is impartation. He puts something inside you that was never there before, a depth that could not have been built any other way. Isaiah 61 describes God binding up the brokenhearted not as an instant fix, but as a layered, intentional process. Because what He is after is not a patched version of who you were. He is after something structurally different. So stop measuring this season by what you can see above ground. The roots forming in you right now are not a consolation prize for the growth you wished you had. They are the very thing that will hold the weight of what He is planning to build next. The weakness you are ashamed of is the testimony someone else needs. Here is something we do not talk about enough. We hide our weakness because somewhere we absorbed the belief that it disqualifies us from being taken seriously, from leading, from influencing, from being someone others trust. And church culture, as much as it means well, often reinforces this. Show up strong, speak in victory, project faith even when what you are actually feeling is closer to collapse. So we perform. And while we are performing, someone sitting 3 rows away, or on the other side of a screen, is drowning in the same thing we are hiding. And they are drowning alone because everyone around them looks like they have it together. David did not write the Psalms from a position of power. He wrote them from caves, from years of being hunted by the man he had faithfully served, from moments of feeling completely cut off from the God he had devoted his entire life to. Psalm 22 does not open with a declaration of victory. It opens with, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That is not a polished faith statement. That is a man writing from the floor. And those words have carried millions of people through their darkest moments for thousands of years. Not because David had it together, but because he was honest about the moments when he did not. Your weakness, when you stop pretending it does not exist and start carrying it honestly before God, is not a liability to your story. It is frequently the most credible and most necessary part of it. I am not asking you to perform your pain or put your struggles on display for attention. But consider this. Someone in your life right now is in the same water you are in. And what they need, more than advice or encouragement, is simply to see that someone they respect did not disappear beneath it. Your survival of this season is already someone else's proof that they can survive theirs. I want to bring you back to where I started. That parking lot, that afternoon. That version of me who had run completely out of strength and was sitting alone, wondering if God had made a mistake. Here is what I saw that day. I saw my failure. I saw evidence that I was not who I thought I was. I saw a person who could not even walk through a door. Here is what God saw. He saw the exact location where he was about to build something in me that I could not have received any other way. He needed me to be empty before he could fill me with something that was not sourced from myself. I listened to the silence of those years and heard abandonment. God was writing chapters during that silence, whose benefits I am still living inside of today. I looked at my weakness and saw disqualification. God looked at the same weakness and saw the one condition under which his power could finally move through me, without my ability getting in the way. I did not see any of that while it was happening. Not one piece of it. So, if you are in that place right now, where your weakness feels like the loudest and most real thing in your life, I want you to hear this from someone who has actually sat in that parking lot. He is not absent from your weakness. He is present in it. He is not standing at a distance waiting for you to recover before he begins. He has already begun. The work is already underway in places you cannot yet see. The question is not whether God is with you in this season. He is. The question is whether you will let what feels like your weakest chapter become the one where you finally discover what he is actually made of. Because what I found in my weakest moment was not a God who showed up after the storm passed. I found a God who had been building something inside the storm the entire time, and I think that is exactly what he is doing in yours. If something in this video reached a place in you that needed to hear it, type this in the comments right now. He is present in it. Let that be your declaration over this season, not a feeling, but a choice. And if you know someone who is in a season they cannot explain to the people around them, share this with them. You may not have the words to help them. Let this video carry what you cannot. Every video on this channel begins from the same honest place. Not from having everything figured out, but from looking back at the seasons that made no sense and finally seeing what God was doing the whole time. If that is something you need more of, subscribe, because the next video might be exactly what someone you love needs to hear.